In the darkest blackness of human carnage and suffering, police, fire, and EMS intercede on behalf of mankind. God himself reaches out to those who suffer through their hands. Their service is a clear and unmistakable demonstration that God does not abandon people in the storms of life.
But the chaplain can do so much good in developing relationships and getting a finger on the pulse of things, because we've determined, and I'll make an important point here after, we've determined that the majority of the first responders we dealt with do have a personal faith. Mm-hmm. They really do. Now, there's a small percentage that will say, well, I'm an atheist. Most of the ones I've dealt with have been honest to say, yeah, I mean, I'm not the type of Christian I want to be, but I'm a person of faith. Or, well, I'm agnostic. I don't really know. That's fine. That's fine. Very few that I've dealt, and there have been some who, you remember that one big, the Chicago fire. He's an atheist, but he supported what I did as the chaplain. I'm like, wow, he's a big dude too. So I want to tick you off. So we've got our own little checklist here, and when I say checklist, it's just on the fly. We're developing it as we go, based upon our experiences through the years, and this recent situation where, retirees are at greater risk, and if they have no life outside of the job, that is setting you up for failure. And you're completely disconnected. What's the purpose of your life anymore? Well, how do we overcome that? Well, I'm just going to say it. A church relationship, a relationship with the pastor can really help give you new purpose, new freedom. And so now you realize, dude, you matter. And we're still reaching people. We're reaching into the first responder community. It may not be the same, but by your own admission, it's like, it's like I never was there. Wow, only God can do something like that.
Yeah, they made it so easy.
Yeah.
And like you said, the purpose, because I think that's one thing as a first responder, when you hang up your badge, you put your gun away, whatever the case might be, you've spent your whole career in helping people.
Yeah.
And we're not good at helping ourselves. Mm-hmm. But that was the difference maker for me, was those 3 years of attending the church that you were pastoring at, and I learned so much, and a lot of it I could apply to the fire service, to being in a leadership position. A lot of it fit perfectly to that, which I think gave me that bird's eye view especially after I retired, to be able to look back and see. Getting back to the administrators, I think we talked about in the early part that they're all chaplains are not created equal. And I think one of the things that I see with that is often a department says, okay, let's get us one of those chaplains. And that's what our department did.
Yeah.
Let's get us one of those chaplains to keep the crying women off of our backs when we're going to a call. Great. But we didn't realize that the true value to that was really for ourselves. And that's, I think, coming back to the administration, when they put a chaplain in or decide to have a chaplain program, I don't think they really realize what that should look like.
Right.
So,
right.
And I think most chaplains as pastors, like when I look at yourself in a servant leadership position, you just fill in what you believe that they are looking for, where they don't know what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. There's really not a good model out there for administration to look at in terms of, okay, we're going to put a chaplain program in place, and these are some of the things that we want from that program, and really working with that chaplain to develop that. Because I look at whoever's the head of the department, whether it's the chief, the sheriff, the police chief, whatever, and the chaplain would have a sideways relationship in the command structure, if you will. In other words, if you're going to be having to reprimand somebody or fire somebody, you would consult the chaplain into that before that happens. If there's anything else going on like that, a major change in the way your operation's going to go, you're going to build a new building, you're going to have a second station, you're going to, whatever it is, bring your chaplain into that too. Not that they're going to make any decisions for you, but let them help you make those decisions so that you have that connection. I think that would make a huge difference. Yeah. Whenever you're going to have oftentimes we don't get the ability to know that, okay, we're going to have a fire on 2nd Street, 102 at 1 o'clock this afternoon or 102, somewhere around in there. So chaplain, are you available for that? We can't do that part, but certainly some of those other decisions, and it goes back to those decisions I was talking about with politics, with employee reprimands or just morale problems, things of that nature. That's where the chaplain, I believe, can really shine in the administration. And it's not that the chaplain is going to rat on an individual, the firefighter, or nor is he going to rat on the administration. Hey, the administration is going to be doing this here pretty soon. It's a lonely position.
Yeah.
But it's a necessary position in that regard. If an administration will embrace those concepts of what a chaplain can do for them, it'll make all the difference in the world. Because you're right, you will have, because you're not administration, but you're working beside administration, right. You'll have a better pulse on what's going on within that department than what the leader will.
Yeah.
Employees are always good at circumventing rules, at skirting policies. You cannot legislate anything. It takes leadership. And that's where I think the chaplain can really, really be a benefit to all of this.
Well, it's such a unique position, as you said. You're not admin. You're not and I know that there's dual roles depending on the agency or the department and however they do it. That's up to them. But what we found, what works best is that your chaplain stays strictly in that spiritual supportive role, but is there and can do so much rather than just. And again, I mean, how do we communicate the importance of having a chaplain more in a preventative role than just always reactive? Well, we need a chaplain on scene because we've had some fatalities, or we've got this, or we got, and that's good because we shine in those areas very well. But prevention, having conversations and and I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what it is, except to say that it has to be multifaceted. That we have enormous resource capability. And it is our job to say, okay, listen, this has great value. We want to make this available. But how do we keep people from skirting the issue or circumventing the process or flying under the radar like this law enforcement official in question? How did he answer all the questions correctly to avoid detection? And that, he was rapidly descending into a very dark place, and only his wife knew that because she knew him well enough to know that he's talking some scary talk here and he's not acting like himself.
Well, there again, I think that's one thing that that's overlooked in a lot of instances of what the chaplain can do, and that's with the families.
Yeah.
If that spouse would have had a connection with the chaplaincy, then that would be a great reach out, because there's going to be confidentiality. That goes without, I don't know that we say that enough about the confidentiality that there exists with the chaplain, especially a pastor chaplain. Because there's protection, at least in our state, for that. And I think several others are that way as well. Yeah. But knowing that you can reach out without it going, your spouse's, if it's a wife, talking about their husband who's just retired, she knows that you're not going to say, well, your wife said, you know, unless she's okay with that. But I think that's the thing about, and when you start talking about check boxes too for chaplains, it's not like you have a clipboard. It's not like you have a hard policy on things. The chaplaincy is very dynamic because you're dealing with people, emotions, their spiritual connection, for whatever that might be, and how that is so different between individuals, even at any one time.
I like you said it's dynamic, and I like to add this. The chaplaincy is dynamic and very fluid because it depends on the circumstance and the situation. And, you know, a chaplain can do so much. I mean, obviously, you could do your formal ceremonies, and we have, you know, we've participated in promotions and so forth, and line of duty death, funerals.
And those are important.
Those are very important. And I got to tell you, you know, there's, and I'm, you know, we're just going to talk honestly here. So I wanted to mention something here at this point. It's, and that is the faith component that is really not being discussed. You know, we talked about risk factors. We talked about there not really being a profile. I mean, because anybody's at risk, anybody, you know, could slip into that dark abyss. We do everything we can to protect ourselves. We build resiliency. You know, we've educated ourselves on the need for good health, good hygiene, etc. You know, hydration. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, heck, when we were, Chief and I were at the academy, the Chicago Fire Academy, and you go into the men's room there, and you're standing at the urinal right there in front of your face. If your urine is this color, then you are dehydrated. You know, and right on down the line. So we've done a much better job of tracking and monitoring some of these basic things. And we're learning how to keep ourselves healthy. We're learning how to do a better job of communicating. We're normalizing certain conversations. These are all important. These are all valued. These are all things that are necessary, right? You know, we're trying to change the culture, remove the stigma. You know, heck, the chaplain wants to ride along with you. Ooh, what does that mean? You know, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that that's a normal thing that we do in this agency, is that I'm going to want to ride along with you. You know, it doesn't have to be an all-shift thing. You don't have to babysit me. I just want to get to know you, type of a thing. And for you to get to know me, because the likelihood is, and I say this and it sounds kind of corny, the likelihood is if you spend some time with me, you're going to like me because I'm a pretty likable guy. You know, I think it's important for you to feel that you can trust me and that I can trust you, and that works best. But this faith component that we're still just scratching the surface and not really discussing it in depth. The faith component. It turns out that the individual that took his life recently is a professing atheist,
which is contrary to the multitude of first responders.
Right.
I seen one stat that said that 82% had some sort of faith.
Yeah, 82%. That's pretty high. That's pretty
in that
high.
case, that's worth talking about.
Absolutely.
And so that people understand what is this faith component?
Yeah.
How does that work as being a first responder? How does that work with my home life? And how does that fit in and make everything connect?
Right. Yeah. And removing this fear of a repercussion, or, you know, you're going to get in trouble, or you're going to be singled out. You know, you're one of those religious fanatics. Well, let me put it to you this way. I don't think that you can effectively do your job, and this is going to be hard. This is going to be hard to say, if you don't have the faith component thing working, because you are serving in a ministry role. Well, what do you mean ministry role? A first responder is a ministry role. You are serving who decided it should be such? God did.
Romans 13.
Yeah, Romans 13, the established authorities. What you guys do is because God decided that you would be the thread throughout the fabric of our civilized culture and society that holds us all together. You are. First responders are. If we don't have you, then everything unravels. I'm sorry, that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, when we talk about Homeland Security, it's not that federally established thing. It's our first responders in our hometowns that are going to make the difference when things go to crap, whether that's a weather event or whatever.
Well, and you know, I often refer to my grandfather, Frank the Cop, whose picture is here over my shoulder. I was strategically placed granddad so you could see him. You know, I have his picture here in my office, and I look at it every time I'm in here, and sometimes I get emotional and choked up. But I always remember that two things that were big in my grandfather's world: family and faith. Mm-hmm. And guess what? When he retired, family and faith. The faith component, you know, and I have wonderful memories of being at their home constantly. I have wonderful memories, and you know, their parish was St. Mary's, and that's irrelevant. But I always remember this big, beautiful cathedral and going to mass with them. And you know, my grandfather still couldn't stop being a cop. He'd have to stand at the back of the sanctuary like he was on duty at his post. But family and faith, two big components for keeping us healthy and maintaining resilience. Family and faith are big, huge. Now, in a case like where, you know, this law enforcement official who has no faith, when you're dead, you're dead. There's nothing to look forward to. Pretty much, if you can't solve it or fix it yourself, there's no hope.
Right.
So,
there's hopelessness.
And
helplessness.
There you go. That's right. So right there, I mean, there's two strikes. I mean, two big, huge strikes, and all you need is one more, and you're out of here, bud. And I don't mean to say that carelessly, but we are very strong in the fact that you, as a first responder, you need to understand the faith component. And I want to give you a little example of something that happened to me, which this is not the only example, but this is the one that I want to highlight. And it re-emphasized for me just the role that we operate in. Now, of course, I'm going to refer to a line of duty death funeral that I was a part of. And standing off to the side before we would take the platform, myself as the officiant of the funeral. Then there was a FOP rep from Chicago PD who was going to sing a number for the service, and she was a squared away officer. I mean, everything was, squared away and professional, dignified. She looked like she meant business.
Right down to posture.
Right down to her posture. I mean, it made me want to stand a little bit more erect. And I thought, man, I got to hold my hands a certain way, but she had it down. And I got to tell you, it just sent, chills. It's like, wow, what a great representative for the Chicago Police Department. I don't want to say her name, but CPD, you've got some amazing people, wonderful people. And I remember we're standing off, getting ready to take the platform. Of course, the sheriff of that county would be sitting there with the family and myself and the Chicago police officer. And I felt, I don't want to say nervous. It wasn't nervous that I felt, but I felt the weight of the enormity of the moment. And, people mistakenly think that I like getting up before thousands of people and speaking. No. I mean, it's unnerving, especially when they're all carrying guns. And I just remember standing there feeling something come over me, a presence that just enveloped me, enabling me to do my job. And because it was a huge moment. This was a huge moment. This was the biggest peer support job that I've ever done, right?
And the thing of it is, there's no like practice.
No,
There's no rehearsal.
no.
And you don't have enough time to really prepare in terms of what are they going to accept, what are they not going to accept.
Yeah. Exactly. And so we're talking about this faith component. So I'm standing next to this squared away CPD officer, this FOP rep, and I didn't know what her role was, what she was going to do, but I'm like, well, whatever she does is okay with me because she's going to do it with dignity and honor, and it's going to make everybody look good. The weight of the moment was significant. But then this thing hit me. It came over me, and I was like, wow, I am right where I need to be, doing exactly what I'm called to do, that this is a significant moment, and I am here to represent with honor. I'm here to represent, number one, God. I'm here to represent our sheriff because I was wearing the sheriff's uniform. I'm here to represent first responders. I mean, it was just an amazing moment. And standing off just right next to me, as she stood there, I could see something was going on. She goes, I'm sorry. She literally said, I'm sorry. There's something coming off of you. And she reached out and touched my arm. She goes, whew, I could feel that anointing. She said those words. And she goes, I'm sorry. I said, no, I feel it too. So that faith component, when you know that you are operating in your call, in your assignment, in your role, and you know that you're doing what God has called you to do, it's almost like there's no way to describe it, rather than just trying to do everything in your own strength, trying to figure it out. Did I check the right boxes? I didn't even know what I was going to say. In fact, I'll be honest with you. Do you know I couldn't get my computer to work, so I had to handwrite my notes? I was so annoyed. My computer wasn't cooperating. And there were many things that happened leading up to this moment that were nothing more than a barking dog and a distraction. So I said, fine, I'm going to handwrite my notes. And I had to, just kind of improvise and stick it in some kind of a book that looked official, rather than just a notebook. And I stepped up onto that platform, onto that podium, and I knew I was operating in my role, in my ordained role. Well, when you put your uniform on and you show up, you are operating in your ordained role. And it's so important that you carry this mindset with you that you're here to represent God, that you are the hands and the feet and the voice of God in the darkness. That's what you are. Because God doesn't do things apart from us. God has chosen to work with us. He could have very easily bypassed all of us and said, I don't need you, you little mortal peon. Step out of the way. I got this. Instead, he says, I chose you. And you say, well, here am I, send me. Well, here am I, send me, Lord. And he says, absolutely. I've sent you. I've ordained you. I've anointed you. How do we harness or utilize this anointing? How do we operate what I call in the faith advantage and use the faith component? How do we do that? Well, nobody's teaching our first responders this. Well, that's not what we're supposed to do. They can go to church and learn that. Oh, really?
Yeah, that just kind of reminds me of, like I said, those last several years where I got connected in with you and grown in that spirit, if you will. And honestly, that was one of the things after retirement that finally made my career make sense when it was revealed to me that what I had done was nothing less than a call from God, because I could never reconcile the fact that I was even doing what I was doing as a firefighter, as being in EMS. It just didn't ever reconcile, because I didn't really ever feel as though, get that, because that's different than all this other stuff, that I belonged. And it was like there was something else that was driving me or leading me is a better word for it. It's hard to really put it to words, but it was so real. As a matter of fact, I have in those last years that I was at the fire department, I got to participate in bringing the dead back to life, to being a witness to that, to actually letting God work through me for that. And I know that, probably hurt some people's ears. Even on fire calls, I can remember we went to a bowstring fire in our district, and when the call came over our speakers, you could have cut the atmosphere with a knife. It got so...
Bad choice of words with a bowstring.
Yeah. But I mean, for those in the fire service that understand the nature of bowstring structures and what they do within fires, and just the dispatch was paralleled all of the bad bowstring experiences that I'd ever read about. It was like, that's the way those came in. And like I say, the atmosphere could have been cut with a knife. And going to that call, because of that connection, because of what I had learned and sitting in a pew and listening and then reading in the Word, made that call go so well. In spite of, there was some other things, some precipitating factors that day that I was put in a position at that call of, I knew that my assignment was wrong, that I had been given. Me and a lieutenant had been given an assignment to go to the basement. I knew it was wrong. We went down there because that's what we're supposed to do. I mean, I'm very staunch on that. When you've been given a command, you carry it out. And when you can no longer carry it out, you have to radio back. And I can remember the lieutenant had the thermal imager. I said, we're going upstairs. And then he didn't question it. It was within his right to question me on that. At that point, I was the assistant chief. He was the lieutenant, but it would have been within his right to question it because, hey, we were given an order. And I brought him up, and normally you start at the door that you entered and go either one way or the other through policy. And I took him right to the back corner of that first floor. And I said, put your thermal up there and start going within 5 feet of the thermal indicated where the fire was. We took a pike pole and put the fire out. But it was all leading. It wasn't anything that we'd ever been trained